is a policy analyst in the Canadian government and has spent a great deal of time engaged with decision makers and policy makers working towards a future food system that is healthy, sustainable, and equitable. It is my great pleasure to welcome Nika.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name is Nika Mawini. Today I'm going to be talking about youth advocacy in food and climate. So before I jump in, I'll do a brief introduction of myself. So I have been working as the Executive Director for Youth Climate Safe for the last 2 years. Previously, I was working in the federal government of Canada in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change as a policy analyst working on regulation. So my background is in international affairs and public policy. And with Youth Climate Safe, we are a youth-run nonprofit organization, and we have youth 14 years old to 25 years old that are advocating for policy and systemic changes in food and climate. So today I'm going to talk about 3 of our campaigns that we've worked on and what we've learned in that process, and how by actually transitioning to more climate-friendly food systems, we will also be addressing health concerns as well. So let's jump in. So the first campaign that we did with Youth Climate Safe is political advocacy. So in Canada, we have what's called members of parliament. So a member of parliament is like a congressperson in the United States. They represent a geographic area. And in Canada, we have 336 members of parliament. So we emailed all of them, and we asked them, we'd like to meet with you to talk about what youth are concerned about when it comes to food and climate change, and to provide education to them on what is happening and what youth want to see improved. So out of those 330, over 20 of them agreed to meet with us. And when we met with them, we gave them education. So we talked about how food systems contribute to carbon and methane emissions. We talked about industrial agriculture. We talked about food waste issues. And in Canada, over 1/3 of food is wasted. So we talked about how that is having a negative impact on climate change and how it needs to be incorporated into the climate policies at the federal level. And by just providing these presentations to them, they started to think more about the fact that this is an important issue, because previously some of them didn't know about these topics that we were talking to them about. And we met with people across different political identities. So conservatives, liberals, the Green Party are all different parties in Canada, and all of them were interested in talking to us. Some of them wanted to talk more about the economic benefit of transitioning to more sustainable farming practices. Some of them cared more about labor issues. So we tried to craft our presentations to meet what they were interested in. And some of the solutions that we gave them, which I'll talk about, is the need to operationalize Canada's food guide. So I'll talk about that in a second. And we talked about the economic opportunities as well of investing in sustainable solutions. So one of the solutions that we focus on are plant-based meats and cultivated proteins as a solution to industrial factory farming, which has a lot of negative impacts on the environment. So we provided different policy proposals, and we basically just opened the door to have a continuous relationship with these different members of parliament. So this is one of the campaigns that we did. So another campaign that we've been working on is healthy school food. So as Fabio was saying about changing institutional policies as well, this is one of the ones that we worked on. So in Canada, we have something called the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and this is a coalition of food security groups, climate groups, and groups that work with children that is focused on advocating the government to have a national program which will provide funding to schools to have school food programs. So right now in Canada, most of our schools are public schools. However, a lot of them don't have a school food program. So what the coalition is working towards is having this funding to have school food programs in every school, starting with the lower economically developed areas, the poorer areas, so that those children will have access to healthy school food. And previously I mentioned Canada's Food Guide, so this second picture is Canada's Food Guide. This was the first time that Canada had a food guide that did not have industry influence. This means that no matter how much funding and lobbying that the food industry wanted to do, they were not able to actually influence the food guide. And the food guide was developed by the Ministry of Health, so it was really focused on peer-reviewed research for what is nutritious for Canadians. So you can see here, half of the plate is fruits and vegetables. It focuses on whole grain foods. The drink is to have water, so it says make water your drink of choice, so encouraging moving away from processed sodas and things like that. And when it comes to protein, it just says eat protein foods. So it doesn't specify one type of protein, but it also, as you can see, animal-based protein, which have a higher carbon footprint, are a smaller portion of the protein choices. And there's lentils and other things as well. So one of the main things that Youth Climate Safe worked on is making sure that Canada's Food Guide is something that is being incorporated into schools, and we tried to get our policymakers to see how important that is. And we were successful in helping both the conservatives and the liberals and people from all different political spectrums agree that this should be something that they should focus on. So that was positive, and we are also working on bringing more youth voices into the coalition. So right now, the coalition is mostly adults and parents, so we want to make sure that young people that are in schools are also able to talk about what they want to see in schools, offered in schools. So another type of campaign that we've been working on related to food and climate and healthy eating is Greener by Default campaigns. So what Greener by Default means is that when we look at behavior change, we want to make it easy for people to choose something that is healthy and sustainable. So the idea of Greener by Default is that when you go into an event or a conference, the main choice for what the food is offered is something local, is something sustainable and healthy. And so one campaign that Youth Climate Safe partnered on is with the Food at COP team. So Food at COP is a coalition of youth that are working to advocate for climate-friendly food at the COP28 conference. And we've been doing this since COP25. So for this year, we were actually successful with COP28. So what we did is we worked with Youngo, which is the youth group working with the UNFCCC. And we put together an open letter asking that the food served at COP28 be mostly plant-based, so 75% plant-based, which would offset some of the carbon emissions. We asked for it to be local, so sourcing from local Dubai-based farmers and supporting them, and also being culturally inclusive, so having options that represent different cultures as well. So those were the three demands that we had, and we had over 100 different organizations sign this letter. And the COP presidency says, we intend to demonstrate sustainable food systems in action at COP28. My team has been working to ensure the availability of plant-based food options that are affordable, nutritious, and locally and regionally sourced with clear emissions labeling. So, emissions labeling is another thing that we advocated for. An emissions label basically says, for example, if you're having a vegetable sandwich, it'll say this is 0.5 grams of carbon. But then if you're having like a steak, it'll be like 3 grams of carbon or something along those lines, so you can actually differentiate between different food options and which one will have a lower impact on the environment. So this is an example of another one of the campaigns that we've been working on. So through these different campaigns, Greener by Default, school food, and doing political advocacy with our members of parliament, we're really trying to bring systemic level changes into the food system and try to push for policies that are healthier, more sustainable, and better for youth for the future. So thanks for listening.
Were there any questions? Did anyone want to pose a question about this? Otherwise, please stay down for the panel and we'll